They told him to wait, not rudely, not loudly, just casually, like he didn't really matter. He sat there alone, in a quiet executive office that wasn't supposed to be quiet. Floor-to-ceiling glass, polished wood, soft lighting. The kind of place where decisions worth millions were made every day. Yet right now, the only sound was the ticking of a designer clock on the wall. Minutes passed. People walked by, some glanced and some didn't bother. A few smiled politely, then kept moving. No one stopped, no one asked who he was. No one seemed concerned that a stranger was sitting in a room that required 3 security badges just to enter. One executive laughed as he passed, shaking his head, whispering something to another man in a tailored suit. They both smirked. Whatever was said, it wasn't kind. Still, the man waiting didn't move. He didn't check his phone. He didn't sigh. He didn't look annoyed. He simply waited. An assistant finally stepped in, holding a tablet, eyes distracted. She paused, looked at him, then said, "They'll be with you when they're done." Her tone was professional, but distant, like she was talking to someone temporary. She left before he could respond. Another minute. Then another. Inside the nearby boardroom, voices rose, confident, loud, important sounding. Laughter echoed through the glass. Decisions were being made without him. Or so they thought. One executive glanced out again, longer this time. His smile faded just a little. Something about the man sitting there didn't fit. Not his clothes, they were simple. Not his posture, relaxed, almost casual. It was something else. Something quiet. Something steady. Still, no one said anything. A junior staff member leaned over and whispered, "Why is he still here?" The answer came quickly. Dismissive. Certain he's probably early. Or confused. More laughter. The man in the chair heard everything. Every word. Every assumption. Every subtle insult disguised as confidence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't stand up. He didn't correct them. He waited. Because sometimes, the longest silence in the room belongs to the only person who doesn't need to prove anything at all. This company didn't look like a place where mistakes were made. Everything about it screamed control. The lobby alone felt like a statement. Cold stone floors. Minimalist art. Security that watched more than it spoke. Even the air felt expensive, like it had been filtered through power and money before anyone was allowed to breathe it. Upstairs, the executive floor was its own world. Glass walls, clean lines, names etched onto doors in polished metal. Titles mattered here. Positions mattered. Where you sat at the table mattered. People knew exactly who they were, and more importantly, who they weren't. This was not a place for uncertainty. The executives who ran this company believed they had earned the right to look down. They spoke in numbers and projections and outcomes. People were assets. Time was currency. Respect was reserved for those who ranked high enough to deserve it. Appearances were everything. The way you dressed. The way you spoke. The confidence in your walk. One wrong signal, and you were invisible. Or worse, dismissed. In this building, humility was often mistaken for weakness. Silence was assumed to mean lack of importance. Meetings started on time, but people didn't. Executives drifted in late, unapologetic, knowing no one would question them. Assistants adjusted schedules to match their moods. Entire departments shifted around a single raised eyebrow from the right person. Power moved quietly here, but it moved fast. In the boardroom, voices overlapped. Sharp suits leaned back in leather chairs. Laptops glowed. Coffee cups sat untouched, ordered more out of habit than need. These were people used to being listened to, used to being deferred to, used to rooms adjusting around them. They talked about growth, about influence, about decisions that affected thousands of lives, all while barely noticing the world outside the glass walls. The culture rewarded certainty, not curiosity. Confidence, not patience. If you didn't speak up, you didn't matter. If you didn't interrupt, you were forgotten. That belief had worked for them, for a long time. Executives walked the halls like they owned more than the company, like the space itself belonged to them. Their laughter carried. Their conversations stopped others in their tracks. When they passed, people stepped aside without thinking. No one questioned that order. It had become normal. The waiting room outside the executive offices was rarely used. Most visitors were announced, escorted, prepared for. You didn't sit there unless you were supposed to. And if you were supposed to be there, everyone knew who you were. Except today. Today, the system didn't recognize one person sitting quietly inside it. From the outside, it looked like a simple oversight. A scheduling mix-up, a delay, nothing serious. These things happened all the time, and they were usually forgotten just as quickly. Inside, though, The culture kept moving exactly as it always had. Assumptions were made without hesitation. Judgments followed instantly. No one paused long enough to question them. To the executives, the man waiting didn't fit the picture. He wasn't dressed like them. He didn't announce himself. He didn't demand attention. He didn't act like someone important. So they treated him like he wasn't. That confidence, the certainty that they understood the situation completely, was something they prided themselves on. It was how they made decisions, how they justified them, how they stayed on top. In their world, power was loud when it needed to be and invisible when it didn't. And they believed they could recognize it instantly. They believed power always announced itself. Behind closed doors, they spoke freely. Jokes were made, remarks passed casually, the kind of comments that only surface in places where people feel safe from consequence. No one lowered their voice. No one checked the glass. No one thought twice about who might be listening. Because in a place like this, the rules felt permanent. The hierarchy felt fixed. And the idea that someone without a title, without an entourage, without visible authority could disrupt it felt impossible. The building had seen powerful people come and go. Celebrities, politicians, industry leaders. Every one of them announced. Every one of them treated differently the moment their name was known. This man had no name yet, and so to them, he had no weight. The system kept working the way it always had. Schedules moved forward. Meetings continued. Decisions were made, all while one quiet presence sat just outside the center of it all, unnoticed, unacknowledged, and completely underestimated. They didn't see themselves as cruel. That was the thing. In their minds, this was just how the world worked. Winners on one side, everyone else on the other. And they were very clear about which side they belonged to. One executive slowed his pace as he passed the glass again. He looked inside, then laughed under his breath. "He's still there," he said, loud enough for others to hear. The comment floated down the hallway like it was harmless. Another glanced over, barely hiding a smirk. "Wu lets people just sit there," he muttered, adjusting his cufflinks. "This isn't a waiting room." Someone else chimed in, voice sharper. Probably trying to get a meeting he didn't earn. They didn't lower their voices. There was no need to. In this building, they were the highest point. No consequences reached this floor. At least, that's what they believed. Inside the boardroom, the tone was worse. A chair scraped back. Someone leaned against the glass, arms crossed, looking straight at the man outside like he was part of the decor. "Should we call security?" he joked. Laughter followed, easy, comfortable. Another executive shook his head. "Relax. He'll get bored and leave." They spoke with certainty, with confidence, like people who had never been challenged in rooms like this. One of them stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out into the hallway. He didn't stop when he passed the man waiting. Instead, he slowed just enough to make it obvious. He looked him over once, shoes to shoulders. Quick, dismissive. "This area's restricted," he said flatly, not unkind, but not respectful either. "If you're looking for someone, you should talk to reception downstairs." The man looked up, calm eyes. "No apology. I'm fine here," he said quietly. That answer didn't sit well. The executive scoffed. "Switch yourself," he replied, already turning away. "Just don't expect anyone to rearrange their day for you." The words were meant to sting, to put the situation back in its place. Back inside, the story spread fast, exaggerated, twisted just enough to make it funny. "He says he's fine there," someone repeated, rolling their eyes. Another laughed. "That's confidence. I'll give him that." "It's always the quiet ones," someone added. "They think silence makes them mysterious." More laughter. They built a version of him in their heads. A nobody. A hopeful outsider. Someone who misunderstood how things worked at this level. And once they'd decided that, everything he did fit the story perfectly. His patience became stubbornness. His silence became ignorance. His presence became an inconvenience. One executive made a point of walking by again, coffee in hand. This time he stopped. Stood there just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. "You've been waiting a while," he said, tone sharp with false concern. "Meetings run long around here." The man nodded once. "I know." That response triggered something. The executive's smile tightened. "Good," he said. "Then you understand why we don't drop everything for walk-ins." Walk-ins. The word hung there, heavy and deliberate. People nearby heard it. Assistants. Staff. No one stepped in. No one corrected him. They had learned that silence was safer. Inside the glass walls, a few executives watched, amused. This was entertainment now. A break from spreadsheets and forecasts. One of them shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." Like the man's presence was a personal insult. Another leaned back in his chair. "You can always tell who belongs here," he said. "They don't sit quietly hoping someone notices them." The cruelty wasn't explosive. It didn't need to be. It came in small, precise cuts in tone, in posture, in the way they spoke around him, not to him. They felt powerful doing it. This was their space, their rules, their hierarchy, and enforcing it, even casually, reminded them who they were. The man remained seated. No argument, no explanation, no reaction they could use. That made it worse. Because people like this expected resistance or submission, anger or embarrassment, something that confirmed their position. Instead, they got nothing. One executive frowned. "Is he even listening?" Another shrugged. "Doesn't matter." But it did. It bothered them more than they wanted to admit. The lack of reaction, the refusal to play the role they'd assigned him, so they pushed harder. Comments got louder, jokes sharper. Someone mentioned wasting time. Someone else joked about people knowing their place. Each remark landed in the open air unchecked. They were confident, completely sure of themselves. They had no idea they were building a case against themselves, sentence by sentence, word by word. Right in front of the one person who didn't need to say a thing. He stayed exactly where he was, not stiff, not tense, just still. His hands rested loosely, fingers relaxed, like time wasn't something he needed to manage. His breathing was slow even. If the comments reached him, they didn't show it. If the looks bothered him, they left no trace on his face. This wasn't hesitation. This was control. He watched the room the way someone watches a storm from inside a solid house. Aware of it, unmoved by it, letting it pass on its own terms. Every raised voice, every careless joke, every sideways glance registered quietly, and then settled somewhere deep, without reaction. He didn't correct anyone, not because he couldn't, because he didn't need to. Silence followed him like a shadow. Not empty silence, heavy silence. The kind that makes people uncomfortable without knowing why. The kind that doesn't ask for attention, yet slowly pulls it in. Executives walked by again, some slower this time, some faster. A few avoided looking directly at him now, like eye contact might invite something they weren't ready for. Others stared a second too long, trying to read him, trying to figure out what they were missing. They couldn't. He didn't offer clues. No defensive posture, no nervous movements, no need to assert himself. That calm wasn't passive, it was deliberate. The kind built over years of understanding when to speak and when not to, when noise weakens a moment, and when silence strengthens it. Inside the boardroom, the volume dipped for a second. Someone noticed. They didn't know why. Conversations resumed, but the rhythm felt off, like a song that had slipped half a beat out of sync. He felt that shift, and still, he didn't move. There's a difference between waiting because you're powerless and waiting because you're choosing to. The first feels small. The second feels inevitable. This waiting wasn't about permission. It was about timing. Every insult slid past him without sticking, not ignored, just filed away. Observed, remembered. He wasn't collecting grievances. He was collecting information. Who spoke the loudest? Who laughed the hardest? Who stayed silent? Who showed character? Who showed none? Someone nearby cleared their throat, uncomfortable with the quiet that followed him. Another adjusted their tie for no reason. Small gestures. Tells. He noticed them all. The executives mistook his stillness for uncertainty. They mistook his patience for weakness. They assumed that because he didn't announce himself, he didn't matter. But real confidence doesn't rush to introduce itself. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't compete for space. It waits, knowing the room will eventually turn toward it. A staff member passed by again, slower now. She glanced at him, then away, then back once more. Something in his expression stopped her. Not warmth, not coldness. Just a grounded calm that didn't fit the chaos around it. She hesitated, then kept walking. He watched her go, expression unchanged. The room kept testing him, throwing small provocations into the air like hooks, hoping something would catch. A reaction, a look. Anything. Nothing did. That bothered them more than anger ever could. Because anger gives shape to opposition. Silence leaves space, and space invites doubt. Doubt creeps into certainty and starts asking questions no one wants to answer. They began to fill that space themselves. He's still not leaving. He hasn't said anything. What's his deal? Each remark revealed more about them than him. He let them talk. He let them assume. He let the moment stretch longer than comfort allowed. Time slowed around him, not because he forced it to, but because he wasn't chasing it. The longer he stayed calm, the louder the contrast became. Their movement against his stillness. Their noise against his quiet. Eventually, people stopped laughing as freely. Not all at once, one by one. A pause here, a glance there. Something unspoken started to take shape, and no one could name it. Just a sense that this situation wasn't unfolding the way it should. He felt it too, and he stayed silent. Because sometimes power doesn't enter a room loudly. Sometimes it sits down, says nothing, and lets everyone else reveal exactly who they are before it ever speaks. The whispers started almost imperceptibly, a low murmur in the corner. Not loud enough to carry far, but enough to catch attention if you were listening. Staff passing by slowed their steps. Eyes darted toward him, then away. Some glanced at each other, uncertain, trying to gauge how to act. The air felt different. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't moved. Yet something had changed. The executives noticed it first. A subtle shift in the rhythm of the room, a pause in their jokes, a hesitation in their gestures. Laughter that once came easily now felt forced. One of them rubbed his forehead and shook his head slightly, like a muscle they hadn't realized was tense. Conversations became quieter. Sentences trailed off. People left mid-step, suddenly remembering something urgent elsewhere. Others stopped mid-gesture, freezing for a moment before moving again. There was no obvious cause, no announcement. Just him, assistants whispered among themselves, leaning closer than usual. Is he really just waiting? One said, her voice low enough that it felt like a secret. Another shook her head, lips pressed tight, unsure whether to say anything else. Eyes kept flicking toward him, then away, as if looking to somehow break some invisible rule. The executives tried to maintain control. They straightened in their chairs. One cleared his throat louder than necessary, hoping to fill the silence. Another tapped a pen against a desk. Small gestures, meant to reclaim authority, but they felt hollow. The rhythm of the room had already shifted beneath them. The whispers grew. Not a conversation, but a pattern. Soft speculation, quiet observations. People commenting on him without ever addressing him. Something's off. He doesn't look nervous. Why isn't he leaving? Each remark fed the tension in a way the room couldn't shake. Even the staff at the edges of the room felt it. Phones were lowered, documents held a little tighter, meetings slowed, schedules became secondary. They were caught in the gravity of his stillness, whether they knew it or not. A junior executive glanced toward him, then looked at the others. "Do you notice anything?" she asked softly. No one answered immediately. They didn't want to speak first. There was a hesitation that had nothing to do with fear of rules and everything to do with uncertainty. More whispers, more eyes. People moved slower, talked quieter, laughed less. Every subtle sound in the room became noticeable. A chair scraping, a foot shifting, even breathing seemed louder. The man waiting didn't flinch. He didn't look around. He didn't signal that he noticed any of it. And that made the tension thicker, denser, almost tangible. People began to doubt themselves. Was it really strange that he was just sitting there? Were they overreacting? Should they have acknowledged him sooner? Some tried to justify it quietly, telling themselves he was just an early visitor, someone who didn't belong here. But the quiet still weighed on them, heavier with each passing minute. The boardroom felt smaller than before. The hallway felt longer. The air seemed tighter. Each movement, each glance, each whisper added to a pressure that built steadily, deliberately, and all the while he remained calm. Still silent. Watching, not giving a single hint, not signaling approval or frustration, not giving anyone the satisfaction of reaction. The tension spread. From the executives to the staff, to anyone who happened to glance in the room. Whispers became careful remarks. Careful remarks became subtle shifts in behavior. People stepped lightly. They spoke softly. They moved as if the space itself had grown dangerous. Time seemed to stretch. Every second heavier than the one before. Eyes kept returning to him. Even when people tried not to look, conversations faltered. Smiles faded. The room, once confident and controlled, now felt uncertain, and he still waited. The door opened quietly, almost politely. A man stepped in, not hurried, not loud, just measured. He glanced around the room, taking in the executives, the staff, the whispers that had spread like ripples in water. His presence didn't scream authority, but it carried it unmistakably. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm even, not rushed, not commanding, just clear enough to reach everyone. Heads turned immediately. Conversation stumbled and halted mid-word. Laughter died in throats. The air shifted again, heavier, charged. The executives straightened in their chairs, a collective unease washing over them. Something was different. Something had changed. They felt it before they understood it. The man stepped closer, eyes scanning briefly, settling on the one they had all been ignoring. The quiet man who hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, hadn't said a single word through all the tension. Recognition hit the room like a wave. The assistants caught it first, their whispers catching in their throats. The junior staff froze, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Every eye in the room slowly turned toward him. The man in the chair. He's here. Someone breathed low, almost a prayer. The executives' faces shifted. Smiles that had once been smug vanished. Confidence faltered. The room that had been so sure, so rigid, now wavered. Something had arrived that no hierarchy, no title, no arrogance could contain. The man at the door stepped forward. Slowly. Each footstep deliberate, measured. His gaze didn't dart or glance unnecessarily. He didn't speak until he reached the edge of the chair where the quiet man waited. Then, finally, he spoke. Pause. Respectful. The effect was immediate. One executive froze mid-sentence, pen hovering over a notepad. Another looked as if someone had just tapped their shoulder in the middle of a joke. Laughter was gone. The confident rhythm of the room had vanished. Only silence remained, dense and heavy. Sir Keanu Reeves. The voice continued, steady. The words fell like stones into the space between them, landing with weight, resonating, a shuffle. A chair creaking as someone leaned back too quickly. Eyes widening, jaw tightening. Subtle but undeniable panic flickered across the room. The executives had assumed control, assumed authority, assumed knowledge. None of it mattered now. Whispers erupted. Not from the staff, not from the assistants. From the boardroom itself, one executive whispered to another, low, shaky, "Is that him?" Another couldn't stop staring, lips pressed tight, hands fidgeting with pens. The calm, quiet man they had dismissed as irrelevant had never been more present. He rose from the chair. Not with urgency. Not with aggression, just smoothly, naturally. Standing tall, composed, almost unassuming, yet undeniably commanding. Every movement was watched. Every gesture measured. The room responded without him asking it to. One of the executives finally found his voice. We. He stopped. Words abandoned him. The name alone had stripped him of certainty. Every assumption they had made, every insult, every joke, every whispered dismissal had evaporated. The assistants moved closer, instinctively protective, unsure how to act. The staff outside the glass walls leaned in, some craning to see, everyone drawn to the scene like moths to a light. The quiet man, the one who had endured all the dismissals and arrogance, was no longer invisible. He was the center of everything. The gravity of his presence was undeniable. The executive who had spoken first swallowed, eyes wide. "Sir, we didn't realize." He stopped again, choking on his words. Nothing else came. He had no words that could undo the moment. Keanu Reeves didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to correct anyone. He didn't need to justify himself. The room understood instantly. Every whisper, every glance, every careless comment they had thrown his way now weighed heavily in their minds. The man who had been testing them, challenging them silently, waiting, observing, had won without a single word. The tension that had built over minutes now exploded internally in every person in the room. Panic, embarrassment, realization, they felt it all at once. The calm that had unsettled them before now became a full revelation of power they had underestimated. And still, Keanu stood quietly, simple, composed, unshaken. Every subtle gesture, every slight movement, was proof that he had always been in control. The executives froze, unsure what to do next. Their authority had been dismantled quietly, without confrontation, without anger. They had misjudged the man they thought they could dismiss. The staff, the assistants, even those on the edge of the hallway, felt the change. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with a respect that had arrived too late for anyone to command it. Keanu Reeves had simply been there, waiting, watching, and now in a single moment the room knew exactly who was. No noise, no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just presence, silent, deliberate, undeniable, and it changed everything. The room stayed still as he spoke, no raised voice, no drama, just calm words, measured and deliberate. Every eye stayed on him. Every breath seemed quieter, waiting. The executives who had moments ago been laughing, joking, dismissing, now felt the weight of their own behavior settle over them. "You don't need to shout to be heard," he said, voice steady, clear. "You don't need to dominate to lead." Died. Heads nodded slowly, some instinctively, others reluctantly, faces flushed, not with anger, but with the realization of mistakes they hadn't yet fully admitted to themselves. Every insult, every smirk, Every whispered judgment came rushing back to them with full clarity. Keanu Reeves didn't need to point fingers. He didn't need to lecture. His silence had done the work already. And now, his words were like a mirror, reflecting what they had shown the world without realizing it. One executive shifted in his chair. "Sure, we misjudged you," he said quietly, voice almost breaking. "Completely."
Yes,
Keanu replied. And that misjudgment costs more than just a moment of embarrassment. It costs trust. It costs respect. It costs the ability to lead with honesty. The room was heavy, not with fear, not with anger, but with understanding. The kind that arrives slowly, creeping in, turning certainty into reflection. The kind that leaves no room for excuses. One by one, the executives straightened, not out of pride, but out of necessity. They understood that authority without respect is fragile. That arrogance without awareness is temporary. That power alone is meaningless if it cannot be wielded with clarity and decency. Keanu Reeves continued, calm, deliberate. Judging others is the easiest thing in the world. It feels safe, it feels certain. But it is the weakest form of arrogance. True strength comes from patience, from observation, from understanding before acting. The assistants shifted, unsure whether to move forward or remain in place. Staff outside the glass walls leaned in, silent witnesses to the unfolding lesson. Every person in the room could feel it. Every heartbeat seemed aligned with the rhythm he set. He didn't accuse. He didn't demand apologies. He simply exposed the truth of their actions, the natural consequence of their assumptions. The executive's discomfort was the justice that didn't need to be enforced. It was earned by their own behavior. Some executives bowed their heads, accepting it silently. Others looked away, still grappling with disbelief. None could argue. None could escape. The room itself held them accountable, and his presence magnified it. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," he said next. "But you will always show who you are in what you fail to notice." Respect is not given by fear, by position, or by appearances. It is recognized by actions even when no one is watching. It was quiet now, almost painfully so. Every movement in the room was conscious, every sound deliberate. No one wanted to break the tension. No one wanted to risk appearing careless again. Keanu Reeves looked at each person in turn, not to intimidate, not to shame, but to make them see the consequences of choices they had made without thinking. The room's energy shifted. Respect grew quietly, naturally, without ceremony. He paused, letting the message sink in. The executives absorbed it. Staff absorbed it. Even the whispers from earlier, once restless, were now silenced, replaced by a shared understanding. "Power is meaningless without awareness," he said. "Authority without humility collapses. Judging others too quickly will always come back to test you. Remember that. Live by it, live by it, and you will earn what cannot be taken away." A few minutes passed like that. Not rushed, not forced, simply the gravity of the moment settling into every corner of the room. Mistakes had been made. Lessons had been given. Justice, not violent or loud, had arrived quietly. Executives who had felt untouchable now understood something essential. Leadership is not a claim. It is a responsibility. Respect is not demanded. It is noticed. Patience is not weakness. It is strength. The staff outside the boardroom, the assistants, even those who had only observed from afar, felt it too. Something had shifted, subtly but permanently. A lesson had been delivered that went far beyond the walls of the office. "Carry this forward," he added softly. "Not because I said it, but because the consequences of ignoring it are visible in every moment you choose to judge before understanding." Heads nodded again, slowly, deliberately. Eyes met his briefly, acknowledging not only the words but the truth behind them. The room had changed. It wasn't the same space it had been minutes ago, and everyone felt it. Some shifted in their chairs, unsure what to say next. Some remained silent, absorbing, reflecting. No one argued. No one interrupted. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back. Not in retreat, not in surrender. Simply as someone who had done what was needed. The calm authority lingered. The lesson remained. The executives, still reeling, exchanged looks. Words weren't necessary. They understood. The staff, the assistants, the observers, all of them had learned something too. About patience, about judgment, about the quiet power of presence.